Two things before we get started. First off, towards the beginning of my storytelling this morning, I'm going to invite you to have about 3 minutes of personal reflection time. And during that time, I'm going to want you to write something down. So if you have your phone, you're comfortable writing on your phone, feel free to use your phone. If you need something to write on, pen, index card, we have some in the back. I've got two very eager volunteers that'll help me. So just raise your hand if you need something to write on, and they'll come and pass out. Thank you, guys. They'll pass that out and make sure you are equipped. The second thing is you might be wondering why I'm wearing a red hat. It's not some typical attire for presenting. A couple weeks ago, or maybe last week, no, a couple weeks ago, whenever it was, Ethan Braun was up here. He just come back from his year-long trip over in, Bangladesh, thank you. And he was wearing his Bangladeshi or Bengali garb. This is my English garb. I picked this hat up while I was over there and wore it. I traveled very light while I was abroad. I had just one little carry-on suitcase. So it was a bit like those cartoon characters that are always wearing the same clothes. And, like Paddington always has the red hat and the blue jacket. I kind of felt like that while I was over there because I literally wore the same thing over and over and over and over. And this was my hat that I wore over and over and over. So to get into the spirit of things and to ready to share my story, I thought the appropriate prop would be useful. So this helps you just kind of enter into the experience. I'm really excited about this. I was putting this together last night and I was just thinking, this is going to be a lot of fun. So I hope you're excited too. Alrighty, here we go. It was September 2024. I was in a little town in the middle of Texas called San Antonio. Yeah, not so little, actually. But I was in San Antonio. I was at a women's leadership event. It was a couple days long. And I was there with, probably 500 other women from around the world, mostly the US, but who were focused on learning how to become better leaders in their business, in their families, and in their own personal lives. And one of the speakers challenged us during one of the sessions. Here's a quote from what she said. She said, "The best leaders are focused on getting better, learning from every opportunity, and extending themselves out of their comfort zone so they can be better for their teams, families, and ultimately themselves." And so what she had us do was to take 3 minutes and to write out a list of goals that would put us outside of our comfort zone. 3 minutes, write out a list of goals that would put us outside of our comfort zone, goals that scare you, but that you would be excited if you could accomplish. Okay, so I'm going to give you 3 minutes. Caleb's going to play a little bit of music, give you 3 minutes to reflect on in your own personal space, your own personal comfort zone. Think about what that is for you, and write down as many as you can think of in 3 minutes that would be goals that if you could accomplish, you'd be excited that you could, but that stretch you, that scare you, that get you outside of your comfort zone. All right. All right, I'll let you wrap up there. How easy did you find this activity? Some people found it easy. I did not find it easy, personally. So if you didn't find it easy, you're at least in my company. I managed to get 4 things down on my piece of paper when I wrote out the goals for myself. And I'm going to share those with you. This is just me kind of opening up and letting you into the inner world of Aubrey. So my 4 things, not in any particular order, because that would just take way too much effort to actually try to work through, just got them on paper. My 4 things were, if I could work for Smarter News, which is the news wire that I'm a huge fan of and I'd like to work for them someday, that would be one of my goals, that if I could accomplish, I'd be excited about, but I'm actually terrified of trying to do that. Strength training was another goal, because I'm actually terrified of strength training I might look fit, but that's deceptive. Getting my pilot's license, private pilot's license. I'm afraid of flying, so I want to get my private pilot's license. And then I put 6-month trip to the United Kingdom. Why United Kingdom? I'm not exactly sure why, but this is what I put, a 6-month trip to the United Kingdom. Now, to give you a little bit of context, by the time I got to San Antonio in September of 2024, I had been actively clawing myself out of a pretty dark place in my life. My late 20s were pretty rough. I was suffering from massive burnout. I had pretty serious heart condition that I was working through that left me bedridden a lot of times. I couldn't drive a vehicle. I lost my best friend. And I was dealing with a lot of questions about my faith, my purpose, and my life. It would be fair to say that the end of my 20s were pretty gray. And yet there was a day, and I can remember the day that started to change, and it was actually the day that I got out of the hospital. I had been in the hospital overnight for a series of tests, and I realized that it was time for me to take life by the horns. And if I could choose, I was going to choose to live, and I was going to choose to really live, because I was at a place where I had kind of stopped living. So I wrote these 4 goals. So by the time I get to San Antonio, I've already been working through, let's see, that was 24, so 20, 21, 22, 23, yeah, so several years of working to regain my health and put me on a path to where I felt like I was actually living. I'd been involved in therapy. I just found a therapist, been working with a therapist really hard. That's some of the hardest work. If you've ever done therapy, kudos to you, because it is not for the faint of heart. It's a very difficult and a very lonely process. And I get to San Antonio, and I feel like, okay, this is me trying to push to the next level of trying to figure out where is life really at. And yet when I wrote these 4 things down, it was overwhelming to think about. Just one of them, nonetheless 4 of them, just trying to think of one of them. So I wrote them on an index card, like some of you did today, and I stuck it on my corkboard in my office, and they stayed there and stared at me, and stared at me, and stared at me. I kept working on kind of the basics, the foundations, my health, my inner healing, all these kinds of things, but these goals were always looking over my shoulder every single day. Then one day, this last October, we were having a family get-together at the farm. Craig and Kim were there, and we were hanging out. My aunt and uncle had come up, and my grandma was there, and we were talking, and Kim shared with me that her daughter, Alyssa, was stationed in the United Kingdom right now with her husband, Jesse, who is in the Air Force. And when she said that, it was like this light went on in my head, and I was like, I saw this note in my mind, and I said, I knew, like, it's hard to explain it. I don't know if you might call it like a divine, a divine moment. It certainly felt like that, because it was just this really, really deep knowing that it was time for me to go to England. This goal, this goal wrapped up in all kinds of fears, it was time for it to come off the wall and be put into action. And that's all I knew. I just knew it was time. I had no plan. But I knew it was time to go. Now, I like to plan. I like to kind of have things in control and laid out and set out and whatever, but it was just like, nope, I'm going, and I will figure out the plan as I'm going, and maybe not even have a plan. I had questions like, well, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? How am I going to afford it? How long could I go? Would 6 months really be reasonable, or do I need to kind of think about maybe taking this in bite-sized pieces? And why England? Like, these are just a number of questions. Not to mention the mountain of fears connected to this goal. So here's a few of the fears that were working against me as I thought about taking this adventure. Flying. I really struggle with flying. I have since I was a very young teenager. It is one of the most, if you think of the scariest thing that you ever do in your life, that's probably what flying is like for me. And yet I keep flying, even though it about kills me every time I do. I have gotten better, but it's a big one. The last time I flew internationally was back in college, and I was throwing up in the airport before we left. So it just kind of gives you an idea of, like, this is not easy. Another fear, traveling alone as a single female. We all are very familiar with what the world is like and how it's maybe not the friendliest place for a solo female traveler, not the safest place. Traveling abroad as an American. I don't know if you've noticed, but Americans may not be all that popular in other countries around the world right now. And so I was like, what is it going to be like traveling as an American abroad? Will it be safe for me as an American to travel? Getting sick while being alone. I have a lot of familiarity with being very sick, and that happening without anybody around that I know to be able to help me, there's fear with that. What if there was a medical emergency? What if I was in a car accident? What if there's another fear. Shirking my responsibilities. I'm not a college kid. I'm an adult with multiple jobs and multiple responsibilities here at church. I mean, poor Diana pitched in for me while, it's like there's a fear behind, kind of doing what seems more like an irresponsible thing when you're supposed to be the mature, responsible adult, right? What if something happens to my family or my pets while I'm gone? What if something happens to my parents? What about my grandparents? What about my cats? My cats are very important, mind you. They go inside every night. And what would people think? Would people think I'm being childish, irresponsible, unsafe, unreasonable? I mean, I've always at least I feel like I've presented as more of the serious, level-headed type. This doesn't really feel like a very serious or level-headed thing to do. So there's also my own reputation to consider and the fear around what people would think about that. And yet at the core of all of these fears, the big, Papa fear, is this idea of vulnerability. I've gotten pretty good at avoiding vulnerability during my life. I like to try to avoid it at all cost. And you know what happens when you try to avoid vulnerability at all cost? Your life gets very small and it becomes very painful. It's ironic because you're trying to avoid pain, and yet running from vulnerability actually makes it more painful. During my years of being involved in therapy and this pursuit of really bringing myself into more of a whole space, I came across the work of someone who you may be very familiar with. I wasn't, but she's now one of my all-time favorite thought leaders in this space. Her name is Brené Brown, and she is a shame and vulnerability researcher. She is, she may not connect with everyone, but when I heard her work for the first time, I was just like, where has this been all my life? And she talks a lot about the things in life that really matter. She has this framework that one of her many frameworks, she calls it the Daring Greatly framework. And it's basically this paradigm or mindset to move you into what she calls wholehearted living. Now, for somebody who's grown up as a very fearful person, as a person whose number one priority in life is to avoid vulnerability at all cost, this idea of a wholehearted living was remarkably appealing. Terrifying, but appealing. So let me just share with you a little bit of what this Daring Greatly concept is about, and you're welcome to look it up more on your own time. So the concept of Daring Greatly comes directly from a speech, actually, that President Teddy Roosevelt gave back in 1910 called The Man in the Arena. And I'm not going to quote the entire quote to you, but the section of the quote that she pulls the Daring Greatly comes from this. He said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. She has kind of 4 core pillars of the Daring Greatly framework. I'm going to focus on the first pillar, which is this idea of vulnerability. She says, vulnerability is not weakness. We're taught to think of it as weakness, but it is not weakness. This is her premise. And the uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure we face every day are not optional. Our only choice is a question of engagement. Our willingness to own and engage with our vulnerability determines the depth of our courage and the clarity of our purpose. And one of the most powerful ways to engage vulnerability is with this little tiny word that starts with a C. Now, if you were here for my dad's sermon a few weeks ago, this should pop right into your head. Do you remember what the C word was that he talked about? Curiosity. She says, choosing to be curious is choosing to be vulnerable because it requires us to surrender to uncertainty. It wasn't always a choice. We were born curious. And I can attest to that because I've got a nephew that's like 2 and I see that all the time. But over time, we learn that curiosity, like vulnerability, can lead to hurt. As a result, we turn to self-protecting, choosing certainty over curiosity, armor over vulnerability, and knowing over learning. So I've been saturating my mind with Brene Brown's concepts because I just find them so transformational. And as I'm getting ready to go on my European adventure, I choose one operating tool above all else that I'm going to implement as I move into this chronic uncertainty realm. And that was the tool of curiosity. My number one goal was to stay curious at every single point of my 3 months being abroad, and to ask myself the question, what is this giving me the opportunity to learn? This was the model I was wanting to experiment with and daily, because there was 0 times I was in my comfort zone while I was over there. Literally everything is outside of my comfort zone. So I had the opportunity to stay curious constantly and build the muscle of curiosity. And so, 1 week after my conversation with Kim, I bought a map. This is how I started. But I don't know where to start. I bought a map, and I put it up on my wall. This is a map of the United Kingdom, by the way, in case you didn't know. We got England, Scotland at the top, Ireland over there on that side. This is a map of the United Kingdom. And I just put it there, and I'm like, okay, so now what? And 3 months later, I was at my cousin's house in Newmarket. These are my cousins. They're pretty cool. By the way, got a great kid, great husband too, and they have a really lovely dog. And it was surreal. I mean, the whole time being over there was surreal. So, what I'm going to do is share with you 3 or 4 kind of big observations or takeaways from my time in Europe. Because 3 months, as I was trying to think through, how do I possibly break this down into a 30, 45, 1 hour, however long this is going to be, presentation, and take 3 months and everything that I learned and everything that I saw and all the different people I met and all the different things that went wrong, how do you combine that all into, so I'm just focusing on a few key points. And if you want to hear more about it later, we can do that. But here are the big takeaways. By the way, just 2 super tiny, vulnerable moments that happened in the first week that I was there. I get to Newmarket. Alyssa was having to work during the day, so I went out exploring the town by myself. This is a great story. I'm walking down the town, and the sidewalk, and they call it pavement. And I can't figure out how to cross the street. Like, talk about feeling vulnerable, right? They don't really have intersections over there. They have these things called roundabouts, which means that traffic never really stops. So I literally walked all the way down to what I thought was an intersection. Oh, it's not actually an intersection, it's a roundabout, and cars aren't stopping. And there's no crosswalk. They call them zebra stripes. That's what they call crosswalks over there. And there's no crosswalk. I'm like, how do I cross the street? And there's cameras everywhere because England is a surveillance state. And so the idea of jaywalking didn't seem like a great idea because I didn't know if I could get a ticket for, so I'm just like, okay. And there's nobody around. So I'm just like, how in the world does one cross the street around here? So I walk back down the sidewalk, and there's a little shoe shop, like a little old-fashioned cobbler shop. And I walk in the door, and the guy comes out from the back, and I'm standing there feeling very vulnerable. And I go, hi, I'm new here, and I was wondering, how does somebody cross the street? And he just busted up laughing. I'm just like, yeah, I know. He's like, you just cross the street. Look both ways and then cross the street. And I was like, oh, that's how it works. Okay. So that's how one crosses the street over there. And which actually makes driving a little bit even more nerve-wracking because people could be crossing the street whenever, so you've really got to be paying attention to pedestrians. But that's how you cross the street. Second thing, I plug in my blow dryer. I bought this little travel-size blow dryer that had an internal converter that you can switch from American voltage to European voltage. And I get there, first day I'm there, right, ready to dry my hair. I'm like, I got my little tiny, because I'm in a wheelie bag or a carry-on bag, and I paid like $50 for this little hair dryer, and I plug it in. I've got my adapter, because they've got different outlets, shapes than we do here. Plug it in, flip it on, and that thing blows orange, and I'm like, oh my goodness, and then it just goes kunk and dies. And I was like, oh, I forgot to turn it over to the proper power setting. So it's just and you're just like, oh, at least I didn't burn the house down, But these little tiny moments where you're just you're stumbling along through what should be automatic habit, like crossing a street and using a blow dryer, and you're fumbling through life, and it makes you feel vulnerable. Okay, so my overview of my trip. I spent 3 months abroad, pretty much to the day. I had a 90-day medical travel insurance, and so 90 days is what I was there for. I spent most of my time in the country of England. It's in red, there in the center. The countries in blue are countries where I spent at least one night, sometimes multiple nights. So Germany, Belgium, France, Ireland, Scotland, and Denmark. And then the countries in yellow or gold are countries that I technically was present in. And that could vary. So Austria, Switzerland, Wales, Sweden, and Finland. And I count being in an airport, so Finland got on the map, even though I was only in the airport there catching my flight home. One of the things that I did was to help kind of fund and be able to afford this, because it's not exactly cheap doing this kind of thing, was I signed up for a house-sitting platform. And I had never done anything like this before. And there's kind of a little bit of vulnerability that goes behind going and staying in somebody else's house that you don't know, taking care of their animals that you don't know. But it lets you travel and stay for free in exchange for watching somebody's house and pets. And so I took care of these guys while I was over there. Mostly cats. I tried to find cats as much as I could because obviously, and not everybody is listed because Saffron and Bijou, they had siblings that I wasn't really able to get good photos of. So Chandra, Benji, Eddie, or as his owner said, Eddie, me love. Cooper, Lenny, Bonnie, Saffron, and Bijou. And most of these were in England. Bijou and his sister Luna were actually in Scotland. And this is how I spent the majority of my time was over there, was taking care of these beautiful creatures and getting to enjoy seeing the world around where they lived. Also during that time, my mom came over. We didn't know she was coming over when I left because basically I had like 4 house sits and my return plane ticket and my first rental car. That's all I had when I got there. Everything else I had to figure out on the go. So talk about spontaneity for somebody who likes to have it all put together. So about halfway through the trip, my mom came out for 3 weeks to see me, and we did a lot of the kind of European traveling together, which was fabulous. And I had a friend who actually, when I decided to go, she's like, oh, I'll come too. And so she came for a couple weeks while I was over there as well, and we got to spend some of that time together. Some of you will recognize her. There's photos of her on here because she spent time here with us before. The most common question I get asked about this trip was, what was your favorite part? Now, I really think that we could come up with better questions to ask people. This experience has taught me that there would be value in figuring out more specific questions to ask than this one, because this one is really hard to answer, right? So, I'm thinking about how to make better questions to talk to, engage people in conversation who have life-transforming experiences. What was your favorite part? So, I had to go with my time on the beaches of Normandy in France. Now, for those of you who were here last week, you heard me talk briefly about the D-Day invasion of Europe, because last week was the 82nd anniversary of the Allied invasion of Europe. But I'm going to share with you a little bit more of the kind of like my personal observation time being there. So Normandy, France, we stayed in a town called Caen, C-A-E-N. This is in northern France. And Caen was a town that was pretty much destroyed during the Battle of Normandy. The Germans were really established in Caen, and the Allies pretty much had to destroy the town in order to get them to go out. So Caen has gone through some very, very turbulent times in recent history. They have a World War II museum in Caen that was just first rate. So it talked not only about the Battle of Normandy, which it's centered right in the middle of that, but then also about World War II. Now, I'm very interested in World War II history. It's probably my phase of history that I'm most engaged in. But of course, having never really spent time in Europe, I'd never really spent time hearing history from the European perspective. I've been to, World War II museums here, been to aviation museums here where they have old warbirds and stuff like that. But being over there and hearing the history from them, that was very moving. So here we are at the World War II Museum in Caen. One of the things that kind of stood out to me as I was going, we all know the story of World War II, and I think we do well at just telling it over and over and over because it's worth remembering and it's worth learning from. One of the things that stood out to me the most in the World War II part of the museum were these posters. These posters represent the different propaganda from the 4 major powers involved in World War II. So the warning sign, this is an American propaganda poster, and you see Hitler and the Japanese fellow over there. Our homes are in danger now, this is the message, right? The poster in the middle, Russian poster, Soviet, Soviet poster. And you have this lion with the swastika around its neck, so it's obviously talking about Germany and the danger that Germany is posing to the Soviet Union. You have Franklin Roosevelt depicted in a lovely fashion here on the Japanese propaganda poster. And then you have the British poster there on the far side with, again, a German Nazi officer there with the swastika. And it just struck me as interesting how similar all of these look. It's easy for us to look at it and go, well, we were the good guys, they were the bad guys. And yet the only way that war was possible was everybody thought the other guy was the bad guy. And there was a demonization, a dehumanization of everybody. And that's what you have to get to in order to be able to do the atrocities that happened during that period in Earth, is you have to get to the point where everyone else is the enemy, a demon, and non-human. And that's a sobering thought to think of. When it came to Normandy, there was this little plaque on the wall. It said, "The fighting in Normandy had been long and fierce, costing the lives of 37,000 Allied soldiers." This is just the Battle of Normandy. It's a 3-month period, June 1944 to August 1944, June, July, August. 37,000 Allied soldiers, 55,000 Germans, and 20,000 civilian casualties, leaving in its wake a region utterly devastated and deeply afflicted. It is fair to say that it was Normandy that paid the price for the liberation of France. And yet, what's so fascinating to me about this place is that despite being devastated, despite losing so many of their own citizens, the French have so much respect and appreciation and gratitude to the Allied soldiers. To this day, roads are named after Roosevelt and Churchill and Patton and Omar Bradley and Montgomery. Like, you see all of these are their roads in Normandy. Everything about this place memorializes that summer in 1944. And we just don't have anything like that to compare around here. We don't know what it's like to live with that kind of a legacy. I'm going to show you a couple videos here. This is Arbuckle, France. This was part of the Gold Beach sector, so there were 5 beaches that the Allies targeted during D-Day. Gold Beach was one of the British sectors, and Arbuckle is where the British came and established a temporary floating port. You can still see in the water, those kind of dark things in the water, those are still parts of the bridges that they brought in and that would float on the water because there was no port here, but they needed to move all this equipment, right, in and to be able to actually invade Europe. So they developed this floating bridge system that allowed them to turn this area into a temporary port. And they came and unloaded, and you still have parts of that port there. There's still ships that are sunk in the bottom of that harbor. There's still men that are in that water. So this is the British sector. This is Omaha Beach. Omaha Beach has the nickname Bloody Omaha because this is where most of the Allied American casualties happened on the D-Day invasion. The Germans were the most entrenched here, so when the Americans came on shore, they were basically just thrown in a meat grinder. But they held, and they pushed through, and they persevered at tremendous loss. This is Utah Beach. Utah Beach was another American beach. It was easier to get, but there were still lots of casualties. Interesting fact, the son of President Teddy Roosevelt, the man in the arena, was the only American general that actually came on the beach with his men during the D-Day invasion. He landed on this beach, Teddy Roosevelt Jr., with his men. He had bad arthritis, so he came with a cane. Talk about an American hero, right? And this is Pointe du Hoc. Pointe du Hoc was between Omaha Beach and Utah Beach, and there was these cliffs that rose above the water, and intelligence led the Allies to believe that there were German guns instilled on this overwatch that could fire onto the guys on Omaha Beach. So they had the Rangers come in and scale these cliffs to try to take out the guns on Pointe du Hoc. And if I remember correctly, there was over 200 Rangers that went up these cliffs. By the time they secured the cliffs, I think there was about 90 of them left. And this is the American Cemetery overlooking Omaha Beach. I talked about this last week as well, but there are around 10,000 American service members buried in this cemetery. And the amazing thing about this place, if you've ever been to a military cemetery, or really any cemetery at all, but especially military cemeteries, there is a deep sacredness to that space. I don't know what it is about it, but it is deeply, profoundly moving to be in a space like this. What's even more special about this place is that while there is administration, U.S. administration over this land, this is French land. And every single person that works at this cemetery is French. And to stand there and watch French people pour into this place, boys that aren't their own. I don't really know how to explain it. It's just, it leaves me feeling just so humbled and unworthy. Here are a couple pictures of them. They take meticulous care of this place. It's like a shrine, everything. He's polishing the handrails around and then they're trimming the trees and making sure they're just perfect so that nothing is out of place. Not a spot of trash everywhere. Everything is just, and they're not even American. I wrote something last week thinking about D-Day. I'm standing on the sands where the destiny of Europe was decided 82 years ago. All I can think is that for many of the boys on the beaches that day, running into German machine gun fire was their first introduction to Europe. I could zip over the Atlantic by plane, cruise across Europe by train, and freely visit all of these magical places because just over 8 decades ago today, thousands of boys sloshed, wow, straight into enemy fire. I thought of how different the world would be. I thought of all the incredible people who were never born because of the boys who didn't get to live through that day. And I thought of all the people who got to live because those boys died. As I stood in the American cemetery, tears stung at my eyes as our French guide, Sophie, thanked us for coming. So many families never got to say goodbye, she told us. They chose to leave their sons in France so that we would never forget. I am in awe of the French people who still lovingly stand guard over the American boys buried in their soil. I have never been more humbled to be an American. June 6th will never be just another day for me. I have walked those beaches, and they changed me. So, that's my favorite part, as you can tell. Another thing I noticed as I spent time there was that as my perspective grew, I shrunk to size. I think there are several reasons why I had an overinflated view of myself. I think the fact that I'm an American gives me an overinflated view of myself, probably gives us an overinflated view of ourselves. And there's legitimacy to that. I mean, there's never been a country like America in the history of the world. We literally hijack pretty much every other country's news outlets. I mean, every time I was over there and I'd walk past the newsstand, I didn't see a picture of the Prime Minister of England, I saw somebody else. So I think there's valid reasons for us feeling like we are as big as we are. I think the other reason I might have had an overinflated view of myself is that I was born in Texas. And when you're born in Texas, I mean, you just can't help yourself, you know? And then I think another part has to do with my faith, and that I was raised in the Adventist faith. And when you think you're the only one who has it all, it gives you an overinflated view of yourself. And yet, the longer I spent over there, the more I started shrinking to an appropriate size. And there was a tremendous amount of relief that came along with that. I was in the city of York. This is in northern England. This is an old medieval city. In fact, the Romans established this city, then the Vikings, then the English. So it's a pretty old place. And we were on the walls. One of the unique things about York is that it's a walled, it has one of the oldest standing city walls in England. It's like a mile of city walls, maybe more than that wrap around part of the city. And these are medieval walls. So this was built back, 800 or 900 years ago. And you can walk these city walls for free. Just go up and walk around them. So we walked part of the walls. And while I was up there, Alyssa and I were up there, there's this group of teenagers that come running along the walls in their exercise outfits. And I'm like, how would your worldview be different if you grew up exercising on ancient medieval walls instead of a temporary dirt track somewhere in Oklahoma? Not that there's anything wrong with a temporary dirt track in Oklahoma, but I'm just saying, when you're running on walls that are 800 or 900 years old, you've got to see the world differently. Here's just a short video. We're in York, so this is my tour guide. See if we can make sure the sound is good on this, Caleb.
What have we here, Aubrey?
So, this is some pretty old stuff. These rocks down here. Bear with me.
Apparently were part of Roman work. When they came in, they built a wooden structure in 71 AD, and then they put these rocks together in 107 AD. So stuff up here is medieval, so it's a lot younger. But these rocks down here, they've been here for a while.
Wow.
2,000 years. So I shrunk. I was like, actually, I'm just one teeny, tiny dot in the history of humanity, and that is actually a really good thing. Then there was the not-so-pretty side. And there's a variety of directions one could take this. I'm going to take it in a specific angle. You could go to Europe and not really pay attention to the history side of things. And I know that because I was in a pub and I met a guy who was there from Connecticut, I think, and he was in Europe on a drinking tour. So he was just going around drinking his way through Europe. And that's one way one could go to Europe, and it's very valid, and there's a lot of people who do that. So you can go and you can miss a lot of things when you're over there. I mean, you can also gain things, I suppose, but you can miss the history, right? I chose, because I love history, I chose to really dive into, like, anywhere I was, be like, okay, where's the museum? Where's the church? Because this is what, the scent I like, so I went after this. And after months of doing this, I started piecing this puzzle, these pieces of a puzzle started coming together in my mind, and it became increasingly disturbing in a lot of ways. Because there is something very difficult to understand about a continent based on Christianity that has so much conflict. Europe is one of the most violent regions in the world. And one could perhaps excuse that if you thought, well, that's just a human problem. And yet, Europe is the only Christian continent in the world, has been for 2,000 years. And why is it that the continent that has at its foundation these Christian principles and ideas has been so violent? And many times as a direct result of religion. Now, as Adventists, you're thinking, oh, well, it's the Catholic Church, and that's definitely one view to take. However, the story that I saw when I was over there was it wasn't limited to any particular denomination. I was in St. Andrews in Scotland, and St. Andrews is known for golf, university, and martyrs. Quite the lineup. And both Catholic and Protestant martyrs. In America, I feel like at least the story and the narrative and the religion that I have, we like to use our religion as a reason for why America is such a great country. And I'm not discounting that. However, it makes one stop and think. Certainly it made me stop and think. Our story that we like to tell ourselves about Christianity in America is pretty vanilla compared to what you see when you go into churches and museums in Europe. And I'm still processing this and still thinking through this, but I think one of the reasons why is that when you are more concerned about truth over transformation, you get in a lot of trouble. Well, if you're concerned about being right, and your object in life is to convince everybody else that you're right, it's dangerous. And I feel it's dangerous for me. And so my thinking is, all right, how do I make sure that my faith, my system of faith, is more about transforming who I am instead of just convincing other people they're wrong? And lastly, pivot here to a very, very happy part of my time. My dream came true. So one of my big dreams that I had for this European trip was that I would actually get to meet people and have amazing conversations and make friends and learn from other people. And it happened, which was really, really cool. So I was in a little town called Tansley. This is in the West Midlands, kind of right in the middle of England. If you look at England, draw it in half, it's right there, just south of Manchester, about an hour-ish. By the way, that road, it's a two-way road. Yeah, it's fun stuff. And the speed limit's probably 60 miles an hour because that's their universal speed limit. So I was in Tansley for 2 weeks. This is where I was watching Eddie, my love, the cat. And his owner, her name was Isabel. She was going to France because she was French, and she had a house there. She had some work to do there. And I came to watch Eddie. She had me come a couple days early and stay with her, which was fabulous. And she took me around the town and showed me different places. And she said, you know what? There is a Methodist church here in town that they're the friendliest people. And they do a community dinner every Friday. So let's go. We'll have lunch there because it's really cheap. And I'll get to introduce you to some of the people in town so that you have some connections here when I'm gone. Now, Isabel is not a Christian, but she knows the Methodist church in town is really friendly. So we went to the Methodist church. This is a Methodist church in Tansley. And I got to meet some of the people there, really lovely people. And I went back on Sunday for service. So here we are in the little Methodist church. Now, I was the youngest person in the room by about 30 years, so I kind of stood out. And afterwards, they had a little, they called it coffee and biscuit time, which is cookies. They don't eat, cookies and coffee. And I went back to just, socialize, kind of getting out of my comfort zone, right? And I'm back there, and because I stand out, not only that I'm an American, but I have this colored hair instead of white. And there was this one lady that comes up to me, and she basically parks herself next to me, and she just starts talking to me. And she's just delightful. And she goes asking me all kinds of questions about myself. And she goes, how long are you in town for? And I said, about 2 weeks. Oh, 2 weeks. Oh, we'd love to have you come over to our house. And I'm like, oh, that would be so nice. Yes, but you see, we're going out of town. We travel a lot. And let's see. And so she starts to go through her calendar. And she's like, oh, this might be a little bit tricky. Do you have lunch plans today? And I said, no. She's like, well, why don't you come over to our house and we'll have lunch. Like right now, and we'll take you. Like you can come in our car. And so in my head, I thought, oh man. Yes, out of my comfort zone. We're going out of my comfort zone. And I start praying. I'm like, Lord, regardless of what is served, help me eat it. Because I mean, never know. And we get to their house. It's this old house, belonged to his great-great-grandfather. It's older than the United States. It's like, should be a museum. It's freezing cold because energy prices over there are ridiculous. So most people keep their homes very cold. They didn't even heat their home. They just had one room with a little wood stove, and they ran that wood stove, and every other room in their house was like an ice block. Made thank you to the war in Ukraine. And so we get over there, and she's going into her freezer, and she's like, now, what kind of things do you like? We've got this fish, and we've got that thing, and I'm just like, oh. I said, well, I don't really eat a whole lot of meat. She goes, oh, really? Neither do we. Are you a vegetarian? And I'm like, I prefer to be, trying to be how gracious can I be? And she's like, not a problem. We'll just this is totally fine. And she's just like pulling stuff out, and we have lunch together. I spend the afternoon with them. We have fabulous conversations. Her husband, Colin, he's a retired Methodist minister and a historian, so of course we get along like wildfire. And we just have this lovely afternoon in their little house, big house, little room, in Tansley. And she goes, you know what? Do you like to walk? This is an English question. You wouldn't really ask this of Oklahomans, but over there it's like, do you like to walk? And it's like, I don't know. Do I like to walk? We walk here. We just walk. Like, okay. And he's like, Colin loves to walk. Let's go. He'll take you on a walk. He'll like show you around. So later that week, Colin calls me up. Right, you ready to go? Let's go on a walk. And so I get my gear on, and we go on that 8-mile hike. The guy's in his mid to upper 70s, and he's just trucking along, and I'm just like, I love to walk. Blisters on my feet. He takes me up this old railroad line, and we walk through these old tunnels, and we talk about everything. I'm just plying him with questions. What are some of the first historical things that you remember, Colin, growing up? Well, let's see. I remember when Winston Churchill died, and I remember as a child growing up in London, and we would go into town, and we'd go past all these bomb sites, ruins from World War II, or just rubble and stuff. And I remember, and he just goes on and on. What are things about your faith that you really value, Colin? So we talk about faith and God and life and things that really matter. So when I left Tansley after my 2 weeks being there, I shot a little video with Colin and Caroline to send to my mom and dad so they could see Colin and Caroline, because I was just raving about this couple. So here's a video of Colin and Caroline for you to enjoy.
Hi.
So hey, Mom and Dad, I'm here with my new friends, Colin and Caroline. They've been very sweet, and we just wanted to say a quick hello.
Indeed.
And it's nice to meet your daughter.
Lovely to meet
You're a
her.
wonderful daughter. It's been a great pleasure and joy.
It has, really has, yes.
You guys have made this
she's a
trip very
blessing.
special. All right.
Love you.
Well, it may continue to be special in all the places you're
And if
going
you can
to.
get your parents to come over, bring them up.
My mom's
Yep.
coming in a couple weeks.
She's welcome.
Good.
If you need a bed, we've always got a bed.
They do, actually. Might be a cold bed, but they've got
I know,
a bed.
we've got electric blankets.
Oh, electric
Electric
Oh.
blankets, you'll be all right.
Yeah, alrighty. Thanks, bye.
Bye.
Colin and Caroline introduced me to their neighbor. Her name is Jackie. She calls me up about halfway through my time in Tansley. She goes, hey, Aubrey. She's from Northern Ireland. I'm not even going to try, okay? Hey, Aubrey, would you like to go into town? I can show you around. We can go out, have a coffee. I could take you around, show you the places, just kind of like hang out. So we went, and I had hot chocolate and a scone with Jackie. I learned the expression from Jackie. They've got this expression. One of these iconic elements of the English countryside are these things called hedgerows. They are these bushes type things that grow alongside and provide they work in tandem with stone walls to keep sheep and that kind of thing in and people out. And they're really, really thick hedgerows, or hedges, hedgerows, they call them hedgerows. So they have this expression when you're feeling really rough or you're looking really rough. The expression is, oh, it looks like you came through the hedge backward. Jackie was a delight and a very good friend. And she told me, look, Aubrey, I know you're over here, you're by yourself, you're a long way from home. If you were my child, I'd want to know someone was there looking out for you. So if you need anything, here's my number, here's my email. Call me and I'll be there, wherever you are. This is Jackie. Before I left England, I was on my last couple days left. I was driving from the southern part of England all the way up to the Lake District. I went out of my way to see Colin and Caroline and Jackie one more time. And here they are.
All right, so we're here. I'm here with Caroline and Jackie and Colin. This is a video, guys. You don't have to smile. You can just say hi.
You have a lovely daughter. Very much so.
And we just had a lovely lunch. And I'm heading to the Lake District, but it was so good to see you guys again.
Oh, and you're well fed and you're looking good. She's looking in very good form.
Thank you for your friendship and hospitality. And you guys are welcome in Oklahoma anytime.
Right.
Whenever you want to brave the American frontier.
You're back.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Somehow I don't think they're coming to Oklahoma. On the very last day of my 3-month adventure, I was in the city of Copenhagen at the National Museum of Denmark. Of course, I would be at the National Museum of Denmark. And I've gone through an exhibition about Danish explorers. And at the end of the exhibition, and I wish I had stopped to take a picture of it, I did not, but at the end of the exposition, on the wall, there was this quote. This is my last day of the trip, literally the last day. It said, "A journey is not a journey unless it changes you." There's something really powerful that happens when you are willing to lean into vulnerability. When you are willing to invite your fears instead of avoid them or run from them. I'd like you to take a moment and look at what you wrote at the beginning of the presentation. Look at those scary goals that you put down. My story is just one small example of how life can change when you choose to go after those kinds of things, when you choose the daring greatly model, when you choose the wholehearted life. I can tell you, one of the biggest changes that I have seen in myself from this experience is that I am so much quicker to turn to curiosity in every moment, even in the mundane, in the difficult and the joyful. I just find myself moving, my whole posture for how I approach life, instead of like this, is like this. And it's like a different life. I may be doing the same things, working on the same farm, working on the same finances, but it's like it's a different space. It's open. It's more wholehearted. So think about what you wrote down and how and when the time might be right for you to go after some of what you wrote down. I put together a short video with a song that was my anthem while I was in Europe. I listened to this every time I got on an airplane, when I was driving, when I was on the train. I had this song playing. I memorized this song while I was over there. So this is my European anthem. It's called "In Charge of the Stars." And I put it to some photos of the trip for you to enjoy and think about, what does wholehearted, what does daring greatly look like for you? How can you face your fears and live a more wholehearted life? Because that's what God wants for us, right? I've come that they might have life and have it more abundantly. Uncertainty, out of control.
Looking up, a million miles away from you, feeling closer than ever, closer than ever. I'm enough from your point of view, 'cause you know me better, you know me better. Ain't it funny how in the darkest night the world illuminates with the smallest light, and it makes me come alive. How could I not feel protected with you in charge of the stars, safe here in the dark? I know who you are, lighting up the galaxy, igniting fire inside of me. My fear fades away and I am free, with you in charge of the stars, with you in charge of the stars. There are days the shadows try to get to me, but then I remember. Even when I'm in the darkest night, my world illuminates with the smallest light, and it makes me come alive. How could I not feel protected with you in charge of the stars, savior in the dark? I know who you are, you're lighting up the galaxy, igniting fire inside of me. My fear fades away and I am free, with you in charge of the stars, with you in charge of the stars. Light it up, you light the way, you showed me who I'm supposed to be. Light it up, I'm in awe of how you're over everything. Light it up, you light the way, you showed me who I'm supposed to be. Light it up, I'm in awe of how you're over everything. Light it up, you light the way, show me who I'm supposed to be. Light it up, I'm in awe. Could I not feel protected with you in charge of the stars, safe here in the dark? I know who you are, you're lighting up the galaxy, igniting fire inside of me. My fear fades away and I am free. Oh, my fear fades away and I am free. Yeah. With you in charge of the stars. With you in charge of the stars. Yeah. With you in charge of the stars.
I hope my story inspires you to live that wholehearted life, to dare greatly, to invite your fears, to live in a state of curiosity, and to have an abundant life. Let's pray. Father, you have given us so much to enjoy you've given us so many opportunities to live fully, and yet we're scared a lot of the time. And we have believed the lie that somehow protecting ourselves prevents pain. We ask that we would have the courage to take the baby steps into living more vulnerably, more courageously, more openly, and more wholeheartedly. And that we would be transformed. We ask and pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, everyone, for coming and for enjoying the story.